Roy, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
You know, it's such a pleasure to talk to you because I've never met you before, but I've heard so much about your history and so much about what you've done in your career. You would be the perfect person to really help us take a perspective and look back at where we are today and what has happened. Let's start with the drum clinics. I've been to some
hmm
recently, and I know that you are the pioneer who started them. Did you envision that they would be the way they are today in the cottage industry that has kind of sprung
I
up?
never had the slightest idea. I was working with Rogers Drums, doing some freelance clinics, and every time they wanted me to do something, I had a record date or a TV show to do. And when I wasn't working, they didn't have anything. So finally, Rogers came to me and said, "Why don't you work for us full time? I mean, a full time clinician." He said, "Yeah, and an artist in residence type of person who could go out and play concerts and represent the product line." So that was really how it started.
Now, in seeing what they've seen today, do you think it's going the right direction with the clinics, with so many people doing clinics and YouTube videos and online schools? Do you think we're going the right direction?
Well, the problem was when I started with the clinics, you couldn't get good information. You had to go through miles of stuff just to find something that would help you a little bit. Now we have the opposite problem. We have so much stuff out there, some of it suspect. You have to wade through miles and miles of information to get something good. So we have the opposite problem today.
What information couldn't you find? What are you referring to?
Well, like how to hold the sticks, how to play a role, how to get a better sound, what to do in a band, how to improve. But I was stuck in Emporia, Kansas. And this was before TV sets, before videos, before hi-fi recording. I mean, when they finally came out with hi-fi recording where you could hear the drums on a record, it was like revolutionary.
I'd actually heard that back in the 60s and 70s, that was one of the reasons why some artists actually got recording deals so they could actually hear themselves play.
Oh, I believe it.
It was
Well, the
amazing.
breakthrough recording was Louis Bellson with Skin Deep. And because Duke Ellington loved Louis, and he said, "We're going to do a feature number with you, but we're going to record it at a private theater, just that one tune, or take a whole day to do it. If we just go to the regular studios, you're going to sound like everybody else, and they won't get the good drum sound." So that drum sound on that recording of Skin Deep was so good, they used it to demonstrate the new hi-fi sets.
Really?
Yeah, because you hear the bass, double bass drums, you hear the high sounds and cymbals, and very well recorded. So that became a demo record, which made it a hit. Kind of like the one I did with Benny Goodman, "Sing, Sing, Sing" in Frankfurt at the World's Fair in 1958 in Brussels, Belgium. Westinghouse gave it away, an album for $1 of Benny Goodman at the World's Fair.
Really?
So because I was on the demonstration record, so to speak, my name got out there really fast. Well, Louis said he sold more copies of Skin Deep because of the fact that they were demoing it, using it for a purpose other than what it was designed for. But that was a breakthrough recording.
You know, when you look back on your career, you taught a lot and you obviously played a lot. Did you have a preference? Did you like teaching better than playing, or
No, I enjoyed all of it. Teaching was a way to have extra income, so you didn't have to take the dumb gigs. That was mainly it. You could turn down a job that paid well. It's a horrible bass player and a horrible piano player. I'd pay not to do this gig. So the teaching gave you a little leeway, a little freeway, free time to make good choices musically.
what did you find was in critiquing yourself? What did you think was your best attribute as a teacher?
I think I was always honest with the students. I never tried to get money out of them. I was never trying to encourage them falsely. I would be really definite with them. So one student asked me, said, "Gee, Mr. Burns, you're not like my other teachers." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Well, you never get mad when my lessons aren't any good." I said, "That's because I don't expect you to learn anything." He said, "That's a terrible attitude for a teacher." I said, "You've got the terrible attitude. I told you what to do. You didn't do it. And another thing is, if you don't change your act in 2 weeks, I'm kicking you out." So I think that was pretty honest.
I think that was pretty honest too. How do you think of what are your thoughts looking at all the, like we talked about before, all the teaching today, all the YouTube videos, all the social media, the overload of what we have? Do you think that's counterproductive to a student trying to learn?
Well, let me compare it to getting an endorsement. When I first came up, in order to get an endorsement, you had to be able to really play. Not the greatest in the world, because there only be a few great guys, but you had to be in that upper echelon, or they wouldn't even talk to you. as companies developed and grew in number, there were more cymbal companies, more drum companies, more like Aquarian, another company. It became easier to get an endorsement because every company had endorsers. So guys are getting endorsements now who haven't ever played a good gig in their life, you know. I'm not mad at them, but I feel sorry for them. But you have drummers getting endorsements that just because they happen to be with a popular band that might last a year, they get an endorsement. And that changes the quality of what's going on.
It's just a whole different world. Now,
It is.
obviously, we're here in your warehouse here in California. Aquarian Drumheads. At some point, you go from behind the kit to now you're a manufacturer. Talk about that with Aquarian Drumheads.
Well, when I was at CBS, where they owned Rogers Drums, I noticed that if you don't have a musician in a position of power in the company, the products are going to suffer. We had a big meeting with the research and development people. They said, we're going to change the Rogers foot pedal from needle bearings to nylon bearings. I said, why are you doing that? We got the best pedal on the market, or at least a lot of people thought so. I said, well, it'll be cheaper. I said, well, won't it change the feel? He said, Roy, you won't be able to tell the difference. Well, with the needle bearings, you could take the beater and pull all the way back, let it go, and it would go 10 times without stopping. It was that smooth, literally. Maybe 9 times, but about that. So they brought the one in with the new nylon bearings and said, here it is. I put it on the table, I held the beater back, I let go, and it wouldn't move. It wouldn't go one forward at all, not even an inch. And we had barrels full of pedals being returned, irate customers, people calling us names because we ruined that pedal. So I went home one day after that had happened. I told my wife, I said, I think I'm going to start my own business. She said, you must be crazy. I said, well, maybe so, but I can't be any dumber than the guys that are ruining Rogers Drums. There's a great drum company, and they're taking it apart piece by piece just because they're stupid. And no one has any power to refute it, you know. So when we started with Aquarian, with my partner, Ron Marquez, I'm not the high-tech guy, but I'm the guy that knows what the drummer wants and needs and what it should sound like.
Mm-hmm.
So one of our foremen came to me one day and he said, I found an easier way to make this drum head. I said, well, show me. He put on a drum and tuned it up. It didn't sound as good as the way we were making it. I said, this isn't as good. He said, but it's a lot easier. So we'll make it the hard way because that's what the guy's paying for. Our job is to help the guy play music, not to make a cheaper product just because it's easier for the guys in the factory. So I think that was my main goal. I got tired of working for idiots, for one thing. So this way, if it doesn't work, I only have myself to blame. I can kick my own behind, you know.
You're a pretty outspoken person.
I've been told that.
Yeah, you're a very outspoken person. I like that, though, because what you see is what you get. Now, having said that, are you happy with your product? You think you have a good product?
Oh, I think we have the best product on the market, without a doubt.
You have a lot of competition out there, and there's a lot of other drum makers.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, here's how you have to look at it. Imagine like cymbal companies.
Mm-hmm.
At every cymbal company, there's someone or some group of people that has decided the type of sound they want. So you go to a Pisces cymbal, the Sabian cymbal, the Zilson cymbal. They all have a certain character of sound that's unique to that company. That's the same thing with drumheads. We went after a particular sound. We tried to emulate the original calf drumhead sound by changing the collar and doing some unique things, holding the head 360 degrees all the way around. And the purpose of that was, if the calf head sound was the original sound, let's see how close we can get to that with modern day materials. So we started off with a philosophy, you might add.
Mm-hmm.
So our philosophy was to make a warmer sounding drumhead, a more responsive drumhead. And I think in a lot of cases we achieved that.
Well, I've heard a lot of great things, particularly about the bass drum heads.
Well, they put us on the map. Yeah, they really did. That was our first hit.
What do you have, or anything, what can you share with us that you might have in store that you think where Aquarian wants to go with their drum heads? You've obviously achieved quality. That speaks for itself. But where are we going from here?
Well, I think we're introducing more and more products. And we're getting a little more creative. We have more people involved with us who are bright, and we have a lot of ideas. And I think that influx of new blood, new thinking, is like our new super pads. That's a practice pad that's unlike anything that's ever been on the market.
Tell us about it.
Well, it feels like a drum. When you put it on top, it's a round pad that goes on top of the drum. You can't play it soft enough on a snare drum to lose the snare sound. No matter how soft you play, you hear the snares. If you hit a tom-tom, you hear the note of the tom-tom through the pad. Da, da, da. Not thunk or plunk or plat, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and guys have sat down. One guy told me he sat down to try them out and play for 3 hours. He couldn't stop. It felt so good. And people just don't believe it until we get them to try it. Then they play on it and say, this is good. And a dealer told me this in Texas. He's a good friend of mine. He said, Roy, that is the greatest practice pad ever developed. And you can play brushes on it.
That's something I know you do exceptionally well.
Well, I used to.
Well, I'm sure you still do, but
Not much. But anyway, that's one of our newest products. And it's an old idea, the practice pad. But this has been done in such a high-tech way through the people who work on this stuff here, that when Chris Brady and I sat down and tried it, I looked at Chris, he looked at me, and he said, this feels pretty good, doesn't it? I said, yeah, better than I expected. And so the more we showed it around, we're getting a lot of response on that product.
that product.
So we want to develop the product line as we go, spread it out.
Drumheads are really, I know that sometimes they're overlooked. People will put them on their kit, they'll tune them, kind of do a quick tune and play them. But they really do tell the story, if they're tuned properly and if they're the right drumhead, of really who the drummer is and really dictate their sound, doesn't it?
Well, the drummer certainly influenced the sound of his equipment, and the equipment influences the sound of the drummer.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the things that we do is we have our measurements are so precise that you can take the drumhead out of the box, tap it with a drumstick, you're tuned. It's pre-tuned. All you have to do is get it down to the tension you want. You don't have to do a headstand because the collar is uneven or it's slipping inside the hoop or any of those things. We've overcome all that. So you actually get a sound ready to go. Just pick out the pitch you want and decide which head you want, tighter or looser, the bottom or the top. And in most cases, you want the bottom head tighter than the top head, because the bottom head only responds to the air column, which means it responds to the top head, which means it's behind. So if it's tighter, it's vibrating faster. That will keep up and the sound will be less distorted.
You have so much knowledge to share with the younger players. For the young player or the younger player who's looking for advice from someone with your experience and your history, starting with the drumheads, what would you tell them? What's really important for them to know about drumheads?
Buy Aquarian.
Besides that.
Well, I think you just have to understand the basic measurements and design of the drumhead. The collar has got to be even. The hoop has to be fairly rigid. If you have a preformed collar, it doesn't match the bearing edge of your drum, you get a wrinkle. You can't get it out until the pitch is too high. Then you're unhappy with it. Just some basic things like that. And the rest of it, drumhead's a pretty simple item. If you make it correctly, you put on the drum, tighten it down, and you start playing.
You know, Roy, I wanted to ask you, with your history going back to Roy Burns as the player, when you look at today's climate of the music scene, what is the first thing that jumps out to you? Looking at the scene today as compared to when you were coming up.
I like when Buddy Rich was being interviewed. They asked him, what would he have done if the music of his era was the same as the music of today? He said he would have been a bank robber. I feel the same way.
Why is that? Explain.
Well, we have all this high technology now. A guy records a drum part in Phoenix, and emails it to a guy in Texas, and they chop it up and put some tracks over it. Before you know it, we have this dreadful sounding piece of stuff they call music. And the musician is really the least of the process now. See, when I was doing studio work, you'd get into the studio, the guy would come over and say, hey, Roy, we're doing this shuffle thing here. What do you got? What can you play? Give me an idea, and I'd try a couple of things. And that's good. So the musician was a participant in the creative process in the recording session. And do you remember the bass line on Barney Miller?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was Chuck Berghoff. He made that up on the record date.
On the record date?
Yeah, the recording said, we need a bass line. We need something. Da, 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 da. Well, that Carol Kay, boots are walking all over you.
Mm-hmm.
Da, da, da. Well, she played electric bass. And a lot of people didn't realize that she was the bass player on many a hit record. But she was the bass player on that record. Because they said, Carol, what can we do here? We need to get something to make this tune unique. So the musicians participated. Everybody I talked to today, because I haven't recorded in years, tells me that they do tracks Then they go back and dub over the fill-ins. Then they go back and add the hi-hat. Then they do this to it, they do that to it. Then they mix it with some other stuff they've been messing with. So we get this, I hesitate to use the word, but this result is a creation by technicians. So there's no soul to any of it. Now that's not all the music that's been recorded, but there's a certain amount of it that's recorded that way. And I find that disappointing because they've taken the musician out of the loop.
What do you think we can do as a society, as musicians, to reverse that, to go back to the way it was, to bring the music back to the music, if you will?
Well, you're never going to get to go all the way back, but you could influence what's going on today. How to do that, Chris Brady, who works with us, does such a great job, told me that he was reading this article where a lot of famous musicians were talking about recording, and they had a really good handle on what was happening and what they thought. And you remember where that was, Chris? That article with all the famous musicians talking about recording?
That might have been one of those Robin Fland's Modern Drummer interviews with the
I
studio
think
roundtable.
I think that, yeah, it was a roundtable
Shelley
discussion.
Mann and
That's it. Yeah, that they really nailed it. If they could get a copy of that right to Modern Drummer, ask for the roundtable discussion by all these recording drummers, they'd get a good picture of it, better than I could give it.
You'd like to see it change, though. You'd like to see it go back, wouldn't you?
Well, I just like to see the musicians get fairly treated. Like I told you, when I started this company with my partner Ron Marquez, it was because I was frustrated because people were ruining products for all the wrong reasons, and we needed a musician with some power. What we need is somebody who's musical in a position of power in all these production things, so we could get the best of the modern technology coupled with the best of musicians. It's not going to go back to the way it was. Nothing ever does. But we could keep it to the point where the musicians are still involved in the process. And I think we would get better music. That's just a personal opinion.
Do you think there's any connection in what you're saying between the fact that there's less work that there used to be, that there's just not the same type of work? That seems to be a common theme that I hear from some of the older musicians, that a lot of the session work is no longer here, that a lot of the other type of work is just not present. Do you think that could be a byproduct of that?
That's true. When I first got to New York in 1955, you could work a lot of gigs for 25 or 30 bucks. And you'd be playing dance music or swing music or light jazz or good quality popular music. And you could survive on that. It was a way to get experience and get started. And you play 4 or 5 nights a week. Well, it's pretty hard for anybody doing freelance work to play 4 or 5 nights a week now, because there's just not the work. And then you have the see, one of the things that happened in the music business that hardly anybody talks about. See, I was the youngest guy on all the big bands I played in. So if you were nice and respectful to the older musicians, they would help you. Hey, play that backbeat at letter C, and play that cymbal when we get to the out chorus. And they would really give you guidance as to how to sound better. So when rock and roll started, the kids started their own bands. That link between the older musician and the younger musician was broken. Now there was no older guy on the bus giving the young guy advice. So what happened was my son was playing his guitar in the garage one day. So I went out and my drums were set up. I said, let's play a tune together. So we played a tune. I went back to the house and I said, Steve has never played with anybody older than himself except me, and I'm his father. What happened? Well, we had that disconnect amongst musicians themselves. And I think that hurt everything. The older guys got bitter. The younger kids didn't want to hear anything except what they wanted to do. And it was, I guess, unavoidable. I don't know what you could have done to prevent it, but I think it cost us. It cost musicians the camaraderie and the passing along of information and experience.
It's funny you said that, because I've heard this comment before from people of your stature, that the younger musicians just seem to have no knowledge of history, of where we came from, where these artists came from, what they listened to, what they did. Do you think that's a problem for us? Sure,
because to them, music started with rock and roll. And music started way before that. Rock and roll is a piece of it. If they were more aware of one of the things that we always had to do as teachers and as students, we would get a list of players to listen to. Now listen to this guy, he does this good. Listen to this guy, listen to this guy. This guy doesn't have great chops, so he's got a great feel. Like Mel Lewis was a great big band drummer. He didn't have great chops, but he knew what to do with a band, and he was one of the great players. And Louis Bellson, he had all the chops in the world, and yet he was a great player too. So you could see the different approaches, and the teachers would point out to you, here's what these guys do, and they're all good. Try to find out what's good with each guy in each style. And that was a great learning experience. It makes you a little more humble too.
I guess it's good to know your roots and know where we came from.
Can't hurt.
No, it can't hurt. And I guess you also, by the same token, can't force people to learn something they don't want to learn.
Well, that's true. I used to say you can lead a student to water, but you can't make him practice.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I think we were excited to talk with you and looking forward to it, because I think it's important to look back and reflect and to learn and to really take access of people like yourself to really learn where we've come from and why we might be going the wrong direction. What are your thoughts about any way to try and help the community? I know we've touched upon it, but just to emphasize, what can we do to try and help the community right itself?
Modern Drummer was a big step. I'll tell you, when the Modern Drummer first came out, I was on the cover of the second issue. And they said Buddy Rich was on the first issue. So I said, well, BR was on the first issue, RB was on the second issue. Private joke. But it gave us kind of status, because we were always the odd man out in the band. We're the only guy not playing notes and chords, or in most cases not singing. So you're the one guy that's kind of alone. That's the reason drum clinics are so well attended. The drummer's always the odd man out in a band.
I've never heard someone say that before.
Well, it's true.
That's an interesting perspective. Talk about that.
Well, all the horn players and guitar players resent the drummer because everybody resents anyone they have to depend on. That's why people resent the boss or the owner or the leader. There's always a certain amount of resentment there because they're forced to depend on that person. Well, they're forced to depend on the drummer. So most of them can't count, can't swing, and can't play anything worth a darn anyway. So I have to play the backbeat louder to keep these idiots in line. And that's called music? Give me a break.
Roy, don't hold back.
I won't. No, I'll try to be more forthright.
Listen, I want to thank you for a few minutes today. You've been very, very helpful. Aquarium drumheads are certainly, what a great product. And I think your knowledge, it's so important. If I could tell you something, I think it's so important that you do stay involved and that you try and help correct some of the things that you've talked about, because we could see them. And unfortunately, it seems like you said earlier, no one's talking about them, are they?
Well, we do try to support some of the events. Chris Brady, who's my right-hand man here in a lot of ways, stays in touch with the artists. He does a great job with that. And we support the clinics they do. We send out door prizes and literature, and we try to support the worthwhile musical guys. You know, we don't want to get involved in just the big commercial things. They don't need us, but we do our part as much as we can. I told one endorser recently, what's the guy's name who used to play with Chicago?
Danny Seraphin.
Danny Seraphin. And he had tried our heads and he liked them, and he contacted us. We don't track down the endorsers. We wait till they come to us. So I told him, I said, you know, Danny, we can't do everything because we're still a small company. But I will tell you this. If we tell you we're going to do it, you can count on it. We will do it. And if we can't do it, we'll tell you. We won't make you promises we can't keep. So I think by doing that and supporting the good players, guys who've proven they're quality musicians, I think that's one of the things we give back to the industry.
Well, Roy, you're needed in the community, so we're going to expect you're going to continue to stay involved and really do what you can, because you're making a lot of good points.
Well, I intend to be active as long as I can.
Well, we're going to hope that's going to be a really long time.
Me too.
We want to thank you for a few moments today on Beato's blog and really appreciate the time and your insight. So we wish you the best with Aquarium Drumheads, but it looks like you're really off and running.
Thank you, Ken.
All right.
Appreciate
nice to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Same here.
This is Kbo from Beato's blog with the great Roy Burns. I mean, he's outspoken, but he talks his mind and he has a lot to say, so we really need to listen to him. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.